Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to see so many faces. I think it's been so far out of all the talking cultures, the most popular one, and we've had the most questions asked out of any talking culture so far. So I can tell that people are really enthusiastic. First of all, I do want to acknowledge that Marina and I are meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and I pay my respects to the elders past and present, and any Indigenous elders who are here in the audience or who might watch the recording afterwards. Marina is in Adelaide and I am in the McLaren Vale area, so we're in South Australia now. Most of you are probably not in this area, or at least from my community. I am excited about tonight because we have done more in preparation for this conversation this evening. So I invite you to stick around till the end, because we will make reference to a video that Marina, or two videos and a PDF that Marina and I have prepared for you, because we want to just talk about ChatGPT tonight in Talking Culture, because it's a conversation. We want to hear your questions. Some of you have asked questions ahead of time when you register through my landing page. So I'm trying to map a lot of those questions to the conversation as well. If I don't answer your question throughout the course of the conversation, please either bring it up when it's relevant. You can interrupt Marina and I if you would like, or we will make space at the end of the conversation as well, so that you can ask any questions that come up. So really think about what's going on and how it's going to apply to you, and how we can help you this evening. Bearing in mind, there is an offer at the end, so stick around, and it really is a community offering, because what we're trying to do is give people skills. And the challenge I have really is that when I ask people, how can I help you? When clients come to me, they say, can you help me with vocabulary and grammar? And before ChatGPT, I would just prompt them to say, actually, your English is good enough, because most people are already operating in their own language, in English, in a way that's good enough for the workplace. So I'm just mindful that I'm on the wrong screen, and I just don't, how can I just need to pin the right. Okay. So people ask me, I want my vocabulary and my grammar to be better. And I understand that feeling. I lived abroad, I speak French, I speak Dutch, and I lived in those environments. And it was my plight to improve my grammar and my vocabulary and be more local-like, be more fluent in those languages. But as a business communicator, your goal is to influence your audience. Your goal is to be impactful in your communication. So I'm excited because it raises the bar, it raises the general knowledge and the general ability for people to use their written language in a certain way in the workplace. And that's great for non-native English speakers. It's great for native English speakers. It's great for improving vocabulary and grammar. It's a great brainstorming tool. It's great for so many elements. And I think Marina has really opened my eyes to a lot of other elements that I just had no idea how to go about using it in that way, personal branding, etc. So the reason Marina has been really instrumental in me understanding ChatGPT and using it more fundamentally as a training tool, but also in my own business, is because she is a non-native English speaker. She is a Russian national. She speaks Japanese. She's been a marketing professional for over 20 years, and 15 of those years have been in English, working abroad. So she is like many of us, or many of you in the audience, who are speaking English as a second language and want to know. She understands your pain points, and she understands how to use ChatGPT as a real game changer. So we've got a tool for you at the end as well, so stay around till the end. But maybe, Marina, could you tell us a little bit more about your journey and how this has come about to make your life more bearable in the business environment?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Leonie, for having me tonight and having this conversation. And thank you, everyone, for your time joining us. So my personal experience started when I moved to England. And at that time, my Japanese was actually better than my English. because I'm originally from far east of Russia. I grew up very close to Japan, and I always thought Japanese is the language I'm most likely going to use. However, life changed differently, and I end up in London. Um, I was lucky enough to get the job, and the job was conference production for Russian gas and oil companies. However, in England and organizing conferences all around Europe, I had to learn on the fly. I had to learn all the vocabulary. I had to learn gas and oil industry, refining industry, and petrochemical industry in a different language. I was spending so much time to mastering my vocabulary, trying to understand what was going on. As a conference producer, I had to spend a lot of time on the phone. I was breaking a sweat every time I had to call. And then I was spending enormous amount of hours doing research and trying to put program together. So 2 years later, I thought I'm doing really well. However, life decided to challenge me again, and we moved to Australia. In Australia, everyone's speaking differently, different accent. Again, I end up being on the phone, trying to break my answering the phone, understanding what people trying to say to me. But I did not want to give up marketing career. So again, I invested a lot of time and asked my partner to proofread my emails, to proofread my email campaigns, my colleagues. Then we hired professional copywriters. However, over 5 years, my confidence went down because I could not do anything myself. I always had to rely on the final proofs by native English speakers. But being a marketing director, it was my responsibility that all printing materials have no mistakes, have no typos. I was the last one to sign on everything. It was really challenging. It was really stressful, but I didn't want to give up. But it's come up at a high price of investing a lot of time, a lot of energy. So when I came across ChatGPT last November, I was just blown away. I wanted to cry because the ability of generate the text, the ability to do the research, the ability of creating sentences for me was just mind-blowing. And honestly, I spent 2 months, November and December, whole Christmas holidays, I spent trying to understand how to use ChatGPT, how to manipulate it well. I read everything what was available, and I even put together my own guide on how to use ChatGPT because it wasn't available yet. By the time I finished the guide, and it looked like everyone was doing it, so I thought it's not my specialty. I don't really need to teach people how to use ChatGPT because there are plenty specialists that started to pop around. However, when I started to look at advice, what they are providing, I found that a lot of prompts, a lot of advice are very basic and actually not kind of cutting through to the details that you need to provide high quality copy. And that's what we discussed with Leonie, and that's how this conversation happened. That a lot of people tried, they didn't get good results, they don't understand how system works, and they just give up. And we can see the high spike of like a hype, and then people's like, I can't use it, it's not meeting my expectations and not doing what I want to do. However, there's so many nuances that you need to know to get really great results. And I'm very passionate now to share and show people how you can use ChatGPT and it will sound professional, it will sound personalized to you, and it will provide you a great communication tool.
Yeah, and I think that's been the anecdotes that have been sent my way, because I've been on LinkedIn a lot and talking about ChatGPT in promotion of this conversation. And one of my contacts said, oh, my native English speaking friend used it and he said it's rubbish. It doesn't do what he wants it to do. And I thought, oh yeah, I would have thought the same thing. Actually, I did feel the same thing when I went on and played around with it, because I just kept bouncing back and forth between more professional, less professional, trying to get the email to speak in a voice that was like my voice to see if I could help students use it. And I couldn't get the voice right. And it would always use phrases like, I trust this email finds you well, which is my pet hate, or thanks in advance, all these cliche statements. It was writing in American with IZEs, and I didn't know how to go about it. So I think that nuance of getting the prompts right is one of the big elements that you taught me, and that was just the tip of the iceberg, I think. And I think the other thing that's worth mentioning here is when we were talking, you were telling me, oh, there's a lot of people doing it, so I don't think that it's very useful for me. And I'll mention that I hadn't used ChatGPT, and I went to a breakfast meeting in South Australia just because the guy that was hosting it had been very kind to me and helped me with my business. Because I thought, I'll go to the breakfast, I'll go and do some networking and meet some new people. And Marina was presenting, and I was sitting in the audience just having my mind blown about the potentiality of it. Now, maybe you guys are already further along in that journey than what I was at that point, but I think every time we talk, there's another little element that takes me on another journey to go, oh my goodness, you can do that. And I think one of those little things that you mentioned was just at the end of a lot of the prompts you give, you say, is there anything else? And I thought that was particularly interesting because I would never think to do that. But in normal conversation, in normal interviews, and probably at the end of this interview, I do like to ask that. So that brings me to this very interpersonal relationship you can have with ChatGPT. I think another comment I had from a colleague was that, oh, you have to talk computer to it. But I've seen you do something else. So how do you talk to it?
So let's just remind what is ChatGPT or another language models, large language models. You will see this LLM, it's large language models. So they build based on algorithms. So they have been educated on a large amount of information. So they read a lot of books, and when they're producing copy or text, they put next word based on most likely, how to say, that what is most likely next word is going to be based on the research data. So it doesn't understand, it doesn't analyze, it only predicts what the words most likely are going to be used together. So that's why you can talk to it as human language, and you would benefit because ChatGPT only can go to understand you based on the prompts, based on the words you're using. So if you're using please, if you use polite language, it's most likely to go into reply within the same framework and the concept and the vocabulary that you're using. So it's the same as people say rubbish in, rubbish out. So if you provide very short, very brief prompt, you're going to get the same outcome. So, and that's why when my approach working with ChatGPT is the same as you would work with your assistant. Imagine someone just out of university, very knowledgeable, learn a lot of material, doesn't have much real life experience yet, doesn't know context. So you need to explain what's the context, in which area you operate. Is it, what's your industry? What's your status? Who you talking to? What's your level? Who are your stakeholders? So if you are in a business environment, the more background you're going to provide that I'm accountant, I work in this country, I communicate with this kind of people, my specialty, this and this and this. So the more context you're going to provide ChatGPT about yourself and the people you're going to communicate with and what the project is, the most likely you're going to have relevant outcome. So you need to, otherwise ChatGPT can just guess whatever out of millions of words and sentences and context that it's available in a database. So it will be just the lucky dip if you don't explain what you do. So
yeah, so you've used it in, yeah, you've used it in very specific cases around your own voice. So how did you go about setting that up, and how has it benefited you?
So I have a workflow.
Can you tell us what that is, first of all? Because that's a word that was sort of new to me, and I kind of got it along the way, but I never asked the question. So maybe it's helpful to know what you mean by workflow.
So workflow is what you do first, second, third, how you approach working with ChatGPT. We will just focus on ChatGPT as the model. However, it is important to mention that we have Bard by Google, we have Bing, which is produced by Microsoft, and we have a lot of other systems that's appearing in the recent times, and more is going to come up. The most used and most known one is ChatGPT. So the concept is going to be the same for all the systems. It doesn't really matter which system you use. Outcomes are going to be different because they've been trained on a different data. So when I'm talking about workflow, my workflow is, I'm saying, let's write an article, or I want to do research on certain subject. If I say, let's write an article, I would do research first. I either find some materials that inspired me to do article online, or I Google it, or I ask ChatGPT, elaborate on this topic. ChatGPT go and provide me some information. I will select what I like, and I would say, give me more information about this context. And I would guide it saying, provide me some controversial information around it or more details around it. What are the key voices in this subject in the industry available? What their specific, angles talking about this subject. So I drag as much information out of system as possible about the topic I want to produce content around. Or I ask or provide and say, this is the author, give me what this author is thinking about this subject. I read, I like, I don't like. And so as much content I can drag out of system that I actually like by questions. So, and we need to remember, when we ask questions first times, the system is going to provide what is on the top. Most popular, the most known information, the most repetitive information available. We can challenge it and say, give me more. Is there more? It will give you a little bit more, the less popular information available in a system. You can challenge it again, and usually the golden nuggets come in later. So you have to proceed and not taking first draft as only available in the system. There is so much knowledge in there that you kind of have to dig in it. Say, give me less popular information around this topic, give me more controversial information around this topic. What are the most, brave voices? Whatever comes, depends on the topic. Maybe if we have some topic exactly. So that's my workflow. Because we talk in the chat, the more information we have either as an input in the chat, any studies, any research, information from your reports, or dragging what is available. Authors, their knowledge, their bullet points, their outlines, their statements, all of this. And then when I have this information, then I would say, okay, give me 5 ideas to create really attention grabbing for the industry, who my reader is going to be, and what the message I'm going to deliver. Give me some outlines. Then I would say, give me an outline, present it to me in the bullet points. Give me a structure of what it can be. And then if I like the structure, or I can tweak the structure, then I start writing. And I would say, write me first paragraph outlining this. Write me second paragraph outlining this. Write me a third paragraph. And then write me opening statement. Write me closing statement. Make sure my message is delivered. And then I would do proof it grammatically if it's grammatically correct, and make sure it's all consistent and sounds well. And of course, I will use a lot of my critical thinking and analysis to see if this what I want to have.
I think that's the key that I have understood. Like already what you're presenting here is very much around that critical thinking. How do we really break apart the question? And sorry, I'm just going to ask everybody to put themselves on mute.
Royce.
Royce, there we go, mute. So just to summarize, you're using a workflow, but you're using a lot of critical thinking. So you're going through the problem and you're breaking it apart. You're asking it to analyze, you're asking it to break it down into sections, to create bullet points, and then you review it at each point and ask more questions. Now, I think that was the key for me, because I just kept bouncing back and forth between more professional, less professional, and it was very uninteresting. So knowing you're talking about workflows, but you also talk about prompts a lot and having the right verbs in a way to speak to it. So can you tell us a little bit about the prompts you use?
I have not actually included, I might include additionally my guide that I designed, first of all for myself, because prompt has to include what we do, in what style we do, what tone we do, and then there would be, how long, how short, and who we address to. And as a non-English speaker, I didn't know, or we can't even remember from the top of our mind what verbs we can have. Write. My most common are write, rewrite, elaborate, critique, and analyze. I use a lot of summarize and present in bullet points. Yeah, that's probably my key. However, I do have a whole list of different verbs that can be used, and it's good to have this list available because it will give you ideas what else you can potentially ask ChatGPT to do.
And while you're on that point, I think one thing that I see you do really well, which I never would have thought of doing, would be if you've got that question, like you've just said, oh, I should include my guide, but actually we could all just go into ChatGPT and say, give me a list of verbs that will help me tell you what I need. So if you
Yeah.
don't know what the answer is, you can ask ChatGPT to help you come up with the answer and give it what it needs.
Absolutely. I created my guide by ChatGPT. I was asking ChatGPT, give me a list of things I can ask you to do. Give me a list of professional styles of writing that is available. So it provides all this list. And we were looking with you, Leonie, that we only remember limited number of styles, but there is what humorous, there is quirky, there is professional, there's so many, and it's good to have them handy because you can fine tune your style by incorporating those adjectives into your.
And I think that's the goal, isn't it? Really, to get that personal style. We can just say, write an email, write a report, write anything. But if we have our own personal branding and our own personal voice that we can use ChatGPT to create, then we can have that as a chat, and we can always plug our bad version of an email into that chat, and it will help you write in that voice that you have. Now, getting to that is not easy, and that's what we ended up doing as a separate video, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But we recorded a couple of videos so that we could spend some time really going through all those nuances and showing how we would go about even just starting to write your own personal style. But let's stay with some of the questions that were raised by the audience. A lot of them were around critical thinking and privacy. Can you tell us a little bit about privacy and your experience with protecting privacy?
Yeah, let's establish what is the private information is. The private information is anything that can identify us. Date of birth, our address, how do we look, our email addresses and bank details, everything that can point directly to us or our client or our business. However, if we're removing those identity points, then information are generic. So, and even today, I was writing email, I put my email address in the window, and I decided to double check and say, give me email address of Marina Ritchie. And ChatGPT said, excuse me, my privacy settings not allowed me to provide your email addresses. So even if you are putting email addresses, OpenAI, the company who designed ChatGPT, they tightened their privacy settings. So it's not that easy to extract that information. So ChatGPT understands what's the private information. So it will not, even if you put it in, OpenAI says for 30 days, we potentially can use your information for training purposes. Most likely, it's not going to come up on anyone else's screen. That is the only challenge that people are afraid of. If they put email and name of the company and something that they discussed, that someone else would come into the system, generate a question, and ChatGPT will provide that answer. It's unlikely because ChatGPT, for the same prompt, every single time generate new outcome. It does not repeat. And even if you ask, give me a text of the book written by author, it would say, go online and buy the book. I can elaborate about that book. I can tell you what is in this book. However, I'm not going to provide you the text of the book.
Interesting. So it's protecting IP as well as privacy. That's clever.
It does. So, of course, if corporations want to use, there is corporate subscription for ChatGPT, and there are systems now that are available to install on the local servers And then you can use ChatGPT locally without connecting it to external data. So some companies would have resources and would see need to do that. But
Yeah.
as the people who were just using it for our email communication and not that privacy concerned information, I would say it's fine.
Yeah, and I think what I'm excited about from a communication professional perspective is just how granular you have to get in your communication. And it is really difficult, like just being able to communicate with anyone, any human on a day-to-day basis. It's hard to make your ideas clear to the other person. And I think ChatGPT is really, to use it well, it forces us to nurture a different part of our ability to communicate. It forces us to be very specific in our communication and keep asking it the right questions. And I think one of the things that I heard not so long ago, I think there's even a book about ask better questions. There's a lot that comes into being a good communicator by asking better questions. So I think instead of it checking grammar and vocabulary, it's actually teaching us to be better communicators by teaching us to ask better questions, ask more specific questions. But we're looking at critical thinking, we're looking at privacy, and we also want to think about safety, because it's not always giving us the truth necessarily. It's trying to please us, it's trying to give us what we want. So could you tell us a little bit about how we can be safe and how we can make sure that we're not just copying, pasting something that comes out of ChatGPT and maybe using it ineffectively?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so ChatGPT not necessarily. I probably would like to share my screen with the diagram that I
Sure.
have.
Mm,
I think it's really gives us opportunity. I really like that diagram to decide, first of all, when it's safe and not safe to use ChatGPT. So if we ask ourselves a question, does it matter if the output is true? If it doesn't matter because we are creating some non-fictional book, we write in a story, we provide enough information for, you know, to generate. So if it's not a problem, if the output is true, then it is safe to use ChatGPT. If it is important that output is true, we need to ask another question. Do you have expertise to verify that the output is accurate? I'm an expert in, marketing and sales, and I understand what is right and wrong and how it would work or not. So when I do this part of work, I can use ChatGPT. However, if we would talk about some physics, I have no idea. So I don't have expertise around that topic. No, I shouldn't be using ChatGPT without additional proofreading and confirming where the information is coming from. Because sometimes it can mix and match different information, and part of that will be correct, but part of that accidentally can be made up. So then we have another safety question that we can ask. Are you able and willing to take full responsibility, legal, moral, for missed inaccuracies? So if you're not able or willing to take responsibilities, you shouldn't be using ChatGPT. But if
yeah,
you
that's really, really interesting. And especially we've got a lot of educators in the audience too, and we're sort of saying, well, okay, the English level has gone up. Everyone's writing with perfect English and a lot of beautiful adjectives and very descriptive language. But when it comes to the workforce, that's great. When it comes to marking someone's English, we've got no idea now, but that baseline has raised. but that's the new responsibility. It isn't about getting your English right. It's about checking and verifying the facts that come out of ChatGPT. So I think that can be a really scary area when you're given a lot of facts, a lot
Yeah.
of information that may not be facts.
Yes, you should be able to read and understand what you're reading. And if you don't, because your English language not necessarily allow you to do, just remember that ChatGPT can be a great translator. Ask it to present the same information for you in the language you understand. It will
Yeah, tell me
translate.
more about that. Do you use it in Russian or Japanese?
I don't. My English is because when I learn certain subject in English, it's easier for me to operate in English. So I did not learn about ChatGPT in Russian. However, sometimes I can't remember certain words and I can just put them in Russian.
Mm,
And I can ask ChatGPT provide me answer in English. So you can create prompt fully written in your native language.
mm,
However, ask it to provide you answer or output in English or
yeah.
whatever, the vice
Mm,
versa. So it's great translator. So to validate the amount of the information that you created, you can specify certain words. You can ask for certain words to give you meaning, and you can translate certain sentences. You can translate whole piece and say, provide me this piece now in Russian.
yeah, I think that was something else I saw you doing, was somehow verifying the information and turning it back around and plugging it back in to do sort of a verification check to make sure it was right.
You can ask, like, is it true? What sources did you use? But ChatGPT does make up sources.
Mm,
Um, so sometimes when I was working with pharmacists and we were creating medical review using ChatGPT. So she had enough expertise to analyze if this information
yeah.
correct, and she was happy to take responsibility for the information being correct and true. However, we were double checking. We would produce a report in ChatGPT, and then we would take that information and put it in the BART in Google AI system
Mhm.
and ask the same question to be produced by different system. BART compared to ChatGPT can refer to certain resources. It can go directly to, I think it's Medical Book Australia or something, where they have all the dosage for medicines, and we would take the same answer from the different source, or we obviously we can go to the source. However, she is fully qualified pharmacist. She knows the only we were trying to do is save her time into typing that information.
And that's the winner, isn't it? I mean, a lot of the, like you were saying before, you used to get your partner or a colleague to double check your English to make sure it was right. Often people are asking me to do that job, so they don't need me for that purpose. Even you and I in the videos that we created, we were operating on that basis. You were plugging in the right prompts to get the response you wanted, and I was telling you, oh, I wouldn't use that sentence, and oh, that sounds a little bit too fluffy, about it looks like you're pandering to the client too much now. So we were trying to pull it in and out a little bit, but together with the sort of technical communication knowledge and the ChatGPT technicalities, it really worked well. And I do a bit of copywriting from time to time, and I'm thinking that's a good way for us to work together, you know, to get that voice right. And that's probably a great prompt that we could give to a company to get their own company style guide. You know, there's just so many possibilities. I think one of the other areas that some of the questions from the registrants, the you know, the audience probably raised, was around job seeking. And now you can just say, here's a job description, pull out the keywords, plug them into my resume, make my resume fit that job description. So recruiters and employers are now at a real disadvantage because they can't really use that resume anymore or the typical resume to judge people's abilities. But it doesn't make you a good speaker. So that's the other challenge. You still have to learn and improve your skills in speaking or writing at some point, I guess.
Look, we still have to be expert. I, for example, didn't like this approach. We expert, we have a lot of knowledge and years of experience, but then when we apply into certain job, especially, you have to rewrite it to match their keywords. Such a waste of time. So if we have this ability, if we believe we are a good fit for the position and we have those skills and someone else can do this work for us easier, then we still have to stand up behind those resumes. We still have to prove that we can do the job to the level is required. So I don't see that anyone is in disadvantage at that moment. We can match the skills to the candidates, I think, faster. And I know the question, should you accept the cover letter written with ChatGPT or should you not? I think you should accept it, but it shouldn't be visible that it's been written with ChatGPT.
And then we come back to the critical thinking and having your own voice and knowing what your voice is. Another thing I saw you do as a non-native English speaker was to write your version, then get ChatGPT to write its version, and then make a comparison or to correct your English. And then you asked to analyze or give feedback, or you got it to break down where you went wrong in your English, and it gave you a bullet point. And then you asked for a training program to improve those things. That was brilliant. I would never have thought of doing that. That's brilliant. I think just being that creative, it's forcing people to be more creative. Catherine, go ahead. You're on mute, by the way. Catherine, you're on mute.
As a facilitator of non-native English speakers who have a lot of assessments that are 1,000, 1,200, 2,000 word reports, essays that are suddenly coming in and they're better than I could write, we're suspicious. Saying to the student, have you written this yourself? They say, yes, of course I have. When past experience shows they can't even write you a simple error-free email. I know there's plagiarism checking software. Is there any way to check if something has been written with ChatGPT? People have said, talk to them, ask them about this, ask them that. But with 25 students per class, it's very time consuming to do that. So
yes, there are some software where you can just ask Google, give me a software which will identify if ChatGPT has been used. However, you as well can ask ChatGPT, can review and rewrite that it's not going to sound or being picked up by the software as machine written. So for any
educator, your staff.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't really, and I think this is ethics, and more than anything, I think the students, when they are learning, I am learning all the time. So I would critique my own work. I write emails by myself and then I put them in ChatGPT and say, please proof grammar and give me your comments. And it would say, I improved this because, I improved that because, and it gives me explanation why it has been changed. So answering your question.
has just posted something in the chat too. That's a tool that you can use.
GPT.
So have a Yeah, have a
Yes.
look at that one, Catherine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And I guess
yeah.
until our governing bodies and powers that be make it, illegal's too strong a word, make it against our company policy to use ChatGPT, there's nothing we can do.
It's an
Because to
interesting
me,
one from an education perspective, though, because I think, like Josie said, it's here to stay. And it is maybe about shifting the perspective. And it's not necessarily, the teachers are in a difficult position, I think, because it's probably the language colleges that have to create new assessments that are
yes,
more adept to use it in a professional way. Because if they're using it and it suddenly sounds way better than what you could talk like, then that's not representing your personal voice. Then you turn up for the job interview and you can't string a sentence together, and you're going to look foolish at some point. So I think it's even beneficial for the person who's using it too much or in a voice that's too far from their own voice, because at some point they're going to get caught out and it's not going to work out well for them. And I guess these tools, they are just tools. We want to give people the tools to be able to go into the workforce and be more productive, efficient, effective, influential, all these things.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It's a tricky one.
I have 12-year-old at home, and she can use ChatGPT to write. However, she would say, but the assignment is that I write. So I'm going to write by myself. And then maybe she will check it or not with ChatGPT. So even school kids, in my experience, understand the difference. And if the assignment is for them to write sentences and generate information because they need to learn those skills, then they do it.
Yeah, because you could just say, oh, I've written this story, now write it in the voice of Shakespeare. I mean, as a really extreme example, so you could use any author to write it in the tone of that author. But as you know, as a 12-year-old, you're going to see it, or write in the voice of a 12-year-old. Maybe that's another way to increase your creativity even. But yeah, it comes back again to this critical thinking, I think, and using it effectively.
I would encourage students to take responsibility, give it a go by themselves, and then ask ChatGPT to rewrite and to improve it. So I think the more you see the difference, the more you read in the difference, your skills are going to improve.
Yeah. Paige, you had a question.
Hello, hi. I just want to say thank you so much for all of the information that you've provided us already. I'm Paige. I work alongside Catherine and Josie at QIBA as a professional year facilitator. And at the moment, there's a lot of talk about where assessments are heading. Now, education as a whole, I understand it's changing the face of education. But when it comes specifically to professional year, the course essentially is about preparing these students for the workplace. So I've had people say to me, oh, you should go back to just using pen and paper and do the assessments in class. Whereas, my argument is, well, if the course is supposed to be preparing them for the workplace and they get into the workplace and they're using it in the workplace to be more productive, to get their work done more efficiently, then surely we should be working with it rather than against it. So I don't think that it ever will be banned, especially in a PY setting. But then how do we assess them? We need to have some kind of marking criteria that we're marking them against. Leonie, I know that you said assessments are going to have to be rewritten. And my question is, how do you envision that's going to be? What do you think the future of assessments is going to look like?
Yeah,
I think that
maybe
better understand. I guess what I'm thinking about a lot for the job situation, for going for a job, how do I get a job with AI? I think we have to encompass the whole element of communication now. We can't really separate out speaking and writing. And as a speaker of other languages, there is an element I'm usually better at speaking just because that's my natural ability. I'm much more comfortable speaking. I'm a pretty good writer, but when I'm in another language, I just like talking. So I have a natural predisposition to speaking better. So that means that I'm now at an advantage because my writing can always be put through ChatGPT, but it means that people have to step out their comfort zone and really speak. And I think with language, I'm passionate about that, because speaking another language well means that you have to be a fool at times. You have to make a lot of mistakes, and you have to go somewhere which is way outside your comfort zone. And so I think this is forcing our students to be able to speak up in meetings. A lot of the the cultural ceiling, I'm going to call it, that we see in the corporate space is because people aren't speaking up, because of cultural difference, because of all these things. And I think speaking is actually, if anything, a more valuable tool, because relationships are built on speaking much more than writing. So again, I come back to this idea that it's just raising the bar where everybody has access to it. It's a bit like classical times where everybody was trained in rhetoric. Nobody is trained in rhetoric now. In fact, we have a really negative look at rhetoric. We think it's what politicians do. They know how to speak, so they're going to use those tools against us. But if we all use those tools to learn how to speak better, and maybe we need to introduce better rhetoric, better understanding of the tools of influence, essentially, that's what I'm teaching people. I do it in writing, but I think if people can really harness the ability to speak with greater confidence, communicate their ideas and influence somebody, that's what a leader is. I'm training people to be stronger leaders. If they can write really well with a tool that's going to correct all their grammar and make them write culturally appropriately for any situation, brilliant. So I think in any assessment situation, I want people to speak more. I much prefer teaching speaking, because it really does show people's personality. It builds relationships, and that's where careers are built. That's where leadership is born. So for me, that's where assessment has to go, in my opinion. What do you reckon, Marina?
I know that there are tools now that actually provide you simultaneously translation.
Yeah, right.
So we, at the same time, we are getting close to each other to understand each other better, because we have all these tools that can assist us in translating and communicating. So in this case, I think language is less and less a problem in understanding. The use of those tools is coming to how well we understand the power of those tools and how well we can manipulate them for the best outcomes. It's the same, we did not have calculators, or we didn't have computers, and we have to use tape recorders, and now we have these tools. We need to use it, and we just review how we utilize them on a daily basis.
Yeah, again, they are just tools. Yeah, they are just tools. Yeah. Look, thanks, Paige, and thanks, Catherine, for those questions. I'm just mindful of the time that we're coming to. Yes. Marina, could you share that slide at the end of your deck, just so that we can share a whole lot of extra information that we prepared ahead of this conversation this evening? And if you've not used ChatGPT, the first video is really great for you, because it's really going to break down what prompts are, how to use workflows, and it's a lot of the theory behind, and theory might be a big word. It's probably the practicalities and what you need to know in order to use ChatGPT effectively. And the second one, we used actually an assessment that I use in my corporate training, where there's a scenario that you have to write to. And I took one of my old students' writing, and we put it in there, and we played around with it. And I think that was really interesting to show Marina's skills next to my skills in English language and business communication, and how we worked together, and how you can benefit to develop your own personal brand. Marina, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the PDF that you are including in this package, because we've got 2 videos and a PDF. and then we can get to that final slide and show where they can access these things.
Yeah, so as Leonie said, we divided this training into two parts. The one part is more what it is and how to use it. And the second was really practical, hands-on. So you would hear us discussing and tweaking the system and getting different results and assessing it. And creating your personal voice is probably the most exciting part you can do for yourself, that it's going to save you a lot of time and energy moving forward, because you can have a preset which is going to describe how you sound with the tone and style, the keywords. And the second part of your personal style is the example the system can refer when creating your next email or piece of content. So that PDF is including step-by-step instruction that you can follow to create your personal brand voice. And also I included in that PDF the prompt that I have created based on the conversation we had with Leonie.
Yeah.
Reviewing that email example, her writing criteria, and the good writing example. So the worst case scenario, you can just use that prompt as a starting point, and then you can tune it up that it make sound really you.
Yeah, just go forward to that final slide, because we're just hitting up against 8 o'clock.
We spent doing it. We were thinking, oh, we're just doing it very quickly in a couple of hours.
It was a technical nightmare, but we finally pulled it together. We did have fun doing it. We got to know each other better. Yeah, so what we've done is it's going to be on the English for Business website, englishforbusiness.com.au. You can always get in touch with Marina or me via LinkedIn. It's in the chat, but it's actually not on my website yet. And so we're giving you it for $27. Basically, you get 2 over 1 hour long videos to take you through the tools and the PDF at the end. And if you go to the next prompt, the next, so you can QR it there, and you get the reduced price for if you use tools 27. So the discount code is tools 27. So you can get it for $27. So look, we've really just spent a lot of time playing around with different technologies and ChatGPT and recording remotely, and it was our 3rd attempt, so we hopefully it's entertaining for you, because we got a lot tighter as we got into it, but also it's just a really great starting point. If you haven't used it, the first video is mind-blowing, and the second video will show you in more detail that personal brand. And I think as a teacher, the other thing we've got to remember is that it takes so much time to build resources and to get all of the resources ready, because you're delivering curricula all the time. And so to me, for someone to come along and say, you've got to rejig all of your assessment tasks, it's tiring. Nobody wants to do that. I don't want to learn a new tool. I don't want to have to figure it all out again. But this one, I think, is going to stick. I think it's got a lot of benefits, but it's going to take us a bit of time to get used to it. Like I said, each time I'm kind of mind blown to see how Marina uses it. I go, oh yeah, I never thought of doing that, or I wasn't brave enough to do that. It seems weird that I've got to overcome these little hurdles each time. So, Marina, you're a superstar. Thank you so much.
So much. Thank you for having me and giving me a voice. Thank you.